Hey guys, it's me again, Eric here at Mountaintop 9, and tonight I want to talk about the album Scream Bloody Gore from Death. It was released in 1987, and to say that it was hugely influential upon the world of metal, well, that would be an understatement. Everyone knows this album one way or another if you're into death metal and thrash, any kind of extreme form of metal. Well, you should have at least a passing familiarity with this release. The interesting thing about this album is how primitive it is in nature. I mean, if you put this album on and listen to it for just a little bit, and then you take it off and put on The Sound of Perseverance, it's like night and day. Let's just talk about the vocals for one thing. On this first album here, Chuck Schuldiner, his vocals are so much more guttural. Alright, they're a lot deeper. Just the overall tone in general is very low and growling. Now, not a Chris Barnes type of growl, not that deep, but it's still very, very guttural and very extreme for the time. You know, another band that is hailed as being a purveyor of death metal, one of the most influential bands in that regard, is Possessed. But even when you put on an album like Seven Churches, the vocals on that album just aren't as guttural as what Chuck is doing here on Scream Bloody Gore. So that's very extreme in that regard. But the cool thing about Chuck on this album vocally is he doesn't just stay in that guttural range. He also lets his voice do some really cool, eerie screams. I mean, just really cool stuff. For example, on a song like Torn to Pieces, he goes from one extreme to the other because he'll start out a line in sort of that guttural, raspy, tortured kind of growling sound, but then the sound of his vocals will ascend up into this primal scream that just sounds very haunting and vicious, and he does that a lot on this album. I noticed that one of the things he does is he tries to be catchy. Even though he's singing in this extreme vocal style, he still kind of wants to hook you. He wants to be catchy. And it's the same thing with the music you'll find from song to song. But anyway, back to what I was saying. If you're listening to an album like Scream Bloody Gore, and then you put on The Sound of Perseverance, well, his vocal style on that one is very high-pitched, almost a shrieking black metal style. I remember when I first got Sound of Perseverance when I was in high school. It came out in 1998. And when I put that one on, I couldn't believe how high his vocals had become. And so much so that he even does a kick-ass cover of Painkiller at the end of that album and does a nice scream, and it kind of blew me away. I couldn't believe how close he came to replicating the screams of Rob Halford on that song, just as far as the range went. So he did a damn good job on that. But anyway, I just remember thinking when I was in high school, when I first put on Sound of Perseverance and I was listening to it, listening to Scavenger of Human Sorrow and Spirit Crusher and all that stuff, I just thought to myself, wow, his voice has gotten so high, he could be singing for a black metal band at this point. But that's the thing with the vocals. I think around the time of Individual Thought Patterns and then through Symbolic, they started to get a little bit higher with each album. Just the general tone started to get in a little bit of a higher range. He wasn't doing the real guttural stuff anymore. I think as far as being overbearingly brutal sounding, I think he was at his most brutal on Spiritual Healing. That album just seems those vocals are very in your face on that one. But let's just talk about Scream Bloody Gore for now. Another cool thing about this album is, just like with any death album, you can hear the bass on here, and Chuck plays the bass himself on this album, and I think that just adds more atmosphere. I love it when you can hear the bass, and that's one of the things I love so much about Death and the Control Denied album, is the fact that you can hear the bass. Now, the bass isn't very acrobatic or anything like that on this album. It mostly just follows the guitar riffs, but it's still cool that you can hear it. It adds a nice bit of thump to the music, makes it even heavier. Now, Chris Reifert of Autopsy fame does the drums on this album. Now, the best aspect of his drumming on this album, as far as I'm concerned, are the really neat little fills that he does at certain parts. There is a song on here, one of my favorites, called Sacrificial. Now, the original title is Sacrificial Cunt, but they had to take the cunt out of the title Anyway, there's a pre-chorus section in this song where Chuck is saying such lovely lines as "watch you bleed to death," "gasping for last breath," "choking on your blood," "I shit into your guts." Aren't those just lovely lines, ladies and gentlemen? And anyway, as he's saying this raunchy ass shit, there are these really cool drum fills that Chris is doing, and they just add so much atmosphere. They really reverberate. Just listen to that section of the song and you'll hear what I mean. It just sounds so damn good and just adds so much to the atmosphere. While we're on the subject of that song, let's just talk about it a little bit more in depth for a minute. It's one of my favorites. Just like I said earlier, how Scream Bloody Gore, it's the primitive origins of the band. Well, these lyrics are Chuck at his most raw and raunchy. He was really in a stage where he was just writing stuff in a very simplistic manner, and it's all inspired by gore and horror. So he wasn't going for any kind of, cerebral type approach. This isn't the type of stuff you would be reading on individual thought patterns or symbolic. I mean, you've got words in this song like "slabs of fat," "lay on the ground," "I ram an axe into your mound." Now, I think that line is fucking hilarious. I don't care what anyone says. Shit like that is just funny because it's just so innocent in a way. This is a time when Chuck was young. He was watching all these horror movies and he was just approaching these songs lyrically in a very simple and direct way, and I love it. It just seems like something a teenager would write. So this is just really cool stuff. And that chorus, when it just hits you full on, because the beginning of the song is just very doomy, and that's the way the song is. It alternates. It starts out in a very doom-laden way, but then the speed just ratchets up a little bit at a time. It gets it builds a little bit during that pre-chorus, but then when that chorus section comes in, when he's saying "sacrificial," "cunt," "I despise," when it's doing that section, it just speeds up and just becomes all out thrash. And so it's a very energetic song. You start with the doominess, but then it gets very, very ferocious. So all in all, that's why "Sacrificial" is one of my favorite songs on the album. It's very aggressive, it has the doom in there, but it also has that great rush of speed, and it's catchy. And once you know the words that he's singing on the song, it makes it even more fun. It's just very gore-filled and it doesn't give a shit. Now bear with me, folks, because I know I'm jumping from one song to another and I'm not going in any particular order. This is more of kind of a free-form rant style of review. But let's go back to the first song now, "Infernal Death." This is the track that kicks off the grim proceedings. This one is like "Sacrificial" in the sense that it starts out with a doomy riff, alright? But it soon kicks into high gear and it's very thrashy, and the lyrics on this one, the words in this song are about piling up dead bodies and reducing them to ash, and it's just very, very grim and bleak, and then the music complements it perfectly, because let me tell you, the music on "Infernal Death" is no stroll through the fucking park. It's very agonizing in tone and goes well with the words, so "Infernal Death" is a great way to kick off the album. I like that tune a lot. Now the second song, "Zombie Ritual." The funny thing about this song is it's the one song from Scream Bloody Gore that Chuck Schuldiner, he kept in the Death set list. It was one that he always would play from this album in the live setting. I've noticed that from watching live videos and whatnot. And you know what? I think this is a decent tune, but it's never been one that I'll just go to right away and go, "Zombie Ritual, I've got to hear that one." It's just not one of my favorites, but for some reason this was one of Chuck's favorite Death songs, at least from this album. And I can probably see why. This song has some different changes. Some of the riff writing in here it's very mature. My favorite part of "Zombie Ritual" is probably when Chuck is singing the refrain, "drifting from the living, joining with the dead." I like that part of the song because it feels like everything is kind of swelling up and getting more potent as the song, it just builds a lot of energy in there because that's right before the chorus. And the funny thing about this album, that's another interesting thing I want to point out. On this album, the chorus parts are usually just the song title repeated. Okay, like in this song it's Zombie Ritual, so he just kind of keeps repeating Zombie Ritual over and over again. And then he does that in other songs, you know, like Sacrificial and Mutilation and Torn to Pieces and Evil Dead, you know, Scream Bloody Gore also. All of these songs have him repeating the title over and over. Now, is that a bad thing? No, not at all. In some of the songs, it's very fucking catchy, like in Sacrificial and in Torn to Pieces. I like the way, you know, he's belting out that line in that song. Now, let's jump to Mutilation for a minute. Out of all of the songs on this album, that one's my least favorite. I just don't think it has any kind of hook to it that really catches me. That song's extremely aggressive and it's just all out balls to the wall, but it just doesn't hook me like some of the other songs on this album. Like a song like Denial of Life, for example. That's another one of my absolute favorites, right up there with Sacrificial. On Denial of Life, it is just non-stop thrash energy, and that one really just gets you pumped up. And I love that chorus when he's repeating those lines, Denial of Life. There is this riff pattern that he's doing beneath that chorus line when he's saying Denial of Life. I love the way that riff just kind of skips along, just the pattern, the way he's picking those notes. I love it. It's so catchy. You can really bite right in and chew on that chorus riff. So that's a big time reason why Denial of Life is one of my favorites. Now, another catchy song on this album, just like Denial of Life and Sacrificial, is Regurgitated Guts. A really cool thing about this song is the fact that it's based upon the Lucio Fulci film, The Gates of Hell, also known as City of the Living Dead. There's a scene in that movie where a girl, her eyes start to bleed and she starts to vomit out her entire intestinal tract. All of her organs come out and it's just a very gruesome sequence, and it's just a classic. Any Gore fan is well versed with that film and that scene, and that's what this song is about. It's about the gates of hell. It's about that sequence in the movie. And this one, just like how I was talking about how the riffing in Denial of Life, how that riffing is catchy, the riffing in this one is too. I just love the verse sections to this song. It just has a very catchy feeling to it. It's heavy as fuck, but catchy. From the minute Chuck sings those opening lines, suicidal preacher, hangs himself, unfaithful servant, goes straight to hell, you know you're in for another great ride. This is just a killer tune. Now, you've already heard me mention the song Torn to Pieces a couple times over the course of this video, and I just want to reiterate that it's so cool the way Chuck performs the vocal lines on this song. He could have done it in a very one-dimensional, rote way where, you know, he just didn't put any effort into it, but that's not what he does. He puts every ounce of energy into this song vocally, and you know, he starts out in kind of a guttural type of way, but goes higher. Towards the end of each line, he goes into a high range, and it's just very haunting and torturous sounding. So that's something that I really like about Torn to Pieces. And another cool thing is that Torn to Pieces is inspired by the Umberto Lenzi movie Make Them Die Slowly, also known as Cannibal Ferox. As a horror fan, I love it that songs on this album are inspired by Make Them Die Slowly and Gates of Hell and The Evil Dead and Reanimator. That just makes it even cooler in my opinion, because it gives me something more to chew on. Now another one, let's skip back a track. There's another song on this album called Baptized in Blood. This one, I'm kind of tired of this song, and I'll tell you why. I had a cassette tape when I was a kid, probably, I don't know, I was probably about 11 or 12 when I got it, and it was called Fate. And what it was it was a death compilation cassette. And it had songs from Scream Bloody Gore, Leprosy, Spiritual Healing, and Human. Because at the time of that cassette tape's release, Individual Thought Patterns hadn't even come out yet. So anyway, the songs on that cassette tape that they took from Scream Bloody Gore were Mutilation, Baptized in Blood, and Zombie Ritual. Now, you may be noticing a theme here. My three least favorite songs on this album are Mutilation, Baptized in Blood, and Zombie Ritual. And I think the reason is because I just heard them so many times on that compilation tape. So by the time I got Scream Bloody Gore a few years later, I was kind of burnt out on tracks like Baptized in Blood and Mutilation. Now, Zombie Ritual I can still listen to. I still think that's a fairly decent tune. It still gets me. That one has a lot of redeeming qualities to it. Baptized in Blood, it does have a boiling atmosphere to it. I mean, it just sounds really hot, which, you know what I mean? It sounds like, you know how the first song talks about coals and burning bodies and all of this kind of shit? Well, this song has this really hot, boiling atmosphere, and it makes sense because when you think about it, the song's called Baptized in Blood, so you know, you think about hot, draining blood and everything, so that kind of fits. Just the boiling ambience of this song, it just sounds so oppressive, so I do like that atmosphere. But I think I just got burnt out on this song. So, Baptized in Blood is one of my least favorites. The song Evil Dead starts out with this melodic, yet very eerie guitar intro, and the guitar, it sounds almost like a synthesizer. It has that kind of quality to it, just the effect on it, and it really just grabs your imagination from the moment you hear it. There isn't anything else on Scream Bloody Gore that sounds like this introduction to Evil Dead. It's very, very unique as far as this album is concerned. And it's kind of maybe a little bit of some early foreshadowing as far as the road that Death would head down ultimately. Because, of course, later in Death's career, Chuck would steer the band in a much more, you know, just add a lot more melody to the music as time went on. But yeah, that intro, it's just very eerie and haunting, sounds very much like a synthesizer in a way, and you've got the crushing rhythm guitar pattern under it, and it's descending, and it's so heavy, sets a perfect atmosphere.